Chairman,
Yes,
would you like assistance when we take a roll vote? Would you like for me to unmute at that time and assist with that?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
When you take roll votes on motions, would you like me to unmute and assist with those and call that roll?
Yes, please.
Okay, very good. And I will try to mute so I'm not rustling papers during the meeting. I know you heard me rustling, and I will not rustle.
You can rustle if you'd like.
Mr. Dwyer, you can go ahead and begin.
All right, terrific. Thank you. All right, so this is a meeting of the Economic Development Tax Board. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to hand off to the clerk for the board. Barb, you want to offer some comments?
Yes, good morning. I will take an initial roll call vote to establish who is here and to establish our quorum. And I will urge everyone to raise hands or do whatever you need to do to be recognized during the meeting, and everything we need to do just for clarity, given our that we are having a virtual meeting, but I'm having very good ability hearing and seeing everyone. I think it will go smoothly. But at this moment, I'm going to call the roll. Chairman Dwyer.
Here.
Board Member Meyer.
Present.
Board Member Bradley. Is Mr. Bradley, President Bradley, on the line?
He is there and he needs to unmute so he can speak.
Okay, I do see his presence, so I'm going to make note of his presence, and I do see that he is muted. Member Johnson.
Present.
Member Ford Griffin.
Present.
And Member Petty.
Present.
And I understand that Member Gunter is has resigned, so we'll make note of that. So quorum being present, I will defer to the chairman to continue with the agenda.
Thank you, Barb. So welcome, everyone. It's been a year since we last met, and we were able to meet in person then. So this is a new format for us. I assume that many of you, if not all, have participated in Zoom conferences, Zoom meetings of one sort or another. We will do our best to manage things efficiently. Barbara has asked that each of us indicate a desire to speak by, I guess there is an opportunity to raise a hand electronically, correct, Barbara?
I'm just looking on the bottom. I'm not seeing that, but I see that there's in the chat, and we have a host, and you also may certainly unmute yourself. So any way you need to be acknowledged, I would say better, more effort than less. And that's my suggestion.
All right, thank you for that. So what I will do is if there are multiple people who indicate a desire to speak at any particular point, I'll just take them in the order in which I observe their indication, and we'll do our best to avoid any of us talking over one another. We'll try to, keep it as if we were all in the room together, run it efficiently. So welcome back to those who have participated in these meetings in prior years, and welcome to anyone who is participating for the first time. It's important for you all to know that this meeting will be recorded, both video and audio recorded by STL TV. And so that will be the official record of the proceedings. It will be available to anyone who may have a need to review the proceedings. And in addition, there will be minutes generated following the meeting, and those will be circulated to all board members for review and comment. unless someone decides otherwise, we will stick with the procedure that we have used in years past, and that is that each of the presenters will be given an opportunity to present his or her information in the order prescribed on the agenda. And then following each presentation, I will call for a motion on that which was just presented, and we will call for a roll call vote. We'll have discussion on the motion if necessary or if appropriate, and then we'll vote, and we'll do a roll call vote, and then we will move to the next agenda item. That way people won't have to stay around for the entire proceedings. Any questions on anyone's part? All right, that's good.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry,
guess-
Chairman. I see a
Yes.
question from Member Meyer.
Yes, Mr. Meyer.
So Chairman, when we do want to speak, should we send you a message in the chat or just raise our hand in front of our screen, in front of our camera?
You can do either or both. And what I'm hoping is that either Barbara or the person facilitating this for STL TV will be more alert than I am likely to be about such things. So if you don't get my attention directly, I'm hopeful that there's backup and that you will be acknowledged. If not, just unmute yourself and speak up. All right?
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you. Then one other note, this is a general note that will bear on each of the presentations, and that is that these funds that are generated by this special tax are dedicated funds, and they are carried forward. Anything that is not expended in a fiscal year is carried forward in the same category for subsequent years. And I think that may be important in some of these categories. And I'm thinking of Mr. Ogilvie in particular, but in any event, just recognize that going into this. And if there are no additional questions, that would complete my opening remarks. The third item on the agenda is titled Consideration to Appoint or Reappoint the Chairman. Is there anyone who wishes to offer any comments or a motion or anything of that sort in that regard?
I would move to reappoint James Dwyer as chairman.
Thank you for that. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays? Hearing none, we'll consider the motion unanimous. Thank you for that vote of confidence, and I will do my best to honor that. So we
Chairman?
can move. Yes.
May I, just for the record and for the minutes, was it President Bradley that made that motion?
No, it was Mr.
No.
Meyer.
Meyer.
Oh, okay, thank you. And was it Ms. Johnson that seconded or someone else?
That was me.
Okay, and since we are virtual, if making motions or seconding motions, if I could ask that you could state your name, that will help for our minutes and for clarity.
Good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coach. All right. We'll move now to the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Now, the minutes were just circulated a few minutes ago. So I don't know whether each of you has had an opportunity to review them or not. It appears, since they are redlined, that they were circulated to some extent previously, and there have been some edits made. I guess my question is, has each of you, each board member, had an opportunity to review the minutes, or would you like to do that at the end of the meeting? If you just weigh in, please, one way or the other.
Chairman, If anyone would like 5 minutes or a designated time to do that, it's perfectly allowable as well.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is defer action on that agenda item until the end of our business today, and that way we keep the substance of the meeting going. All right? All right, so that then brings us to item 5, budget items for consideration. And the first order of business in that category is item 5A, transit. Scott Ogilvie will present. Mr. Ogilvie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and good morning to everybody. I'd like to direct everyone's attention to page 2 of the budget, which is the transit category. Can everybody see that? There's just 2 line items on it.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, you'll recall that the transit fund, which is part of the economic development sales tax, represents 60% of the total funds are allocated to this category each year. So I'm gonna do an update and kind of a recap of the work that this board authorized last year, because the allocation for this year is really directly tied into the allocation from last year. So of course, as you recall, we were here a year ago before you, and this board authorized $1.5 million for an alternatives analysis within the North Side South Side corridor. As you know, around that time of the meeting, the pandemic was just beginning. And subsequent to that, there was great uncertainty around many things, including municipal budgets. So while at the time we were hoping to issue the RFQ to select a consultant, perhaps in April, immediately after this board met, we did pull back for a few months until the city's annual budget was in place, which was July 1st. But since that time, we've resumed work on the analysis, and we're pleased to report that we have selected a team of consultants, and we should have a notice to proceed through BPS with that team beginning next month in March. So I think I'd like to take a moment to do an overview or a reminder of what that alternatives analysis is and why we're doing it. And the alternatives analysis, which we're about to start, developed and grew directly out of the 2018 North Side South Side Transit study, which was conducted by East West Gateway, which established a vision for street running light rail from Grand and Natural Bridge in the north through downtown and to Chippewa and Jefferson at the south terminus. Coming out of that 2018 study, we learned a lot about the North Side South Side corridor and the possibility for constructing light rail within that corridor. But we also learned about some key challenges and unresolved hurdles to completing the project, which included the capital cost of the project, the cost of operating the project, and the degree to which that project was competitive for federal funding through the primary transit funding programs, which are called the New Starts and Small Starts programs. So to recap what the study we are about to begin will do, its first task is to assess ways to close those funding gaps, which I just mentioned, which were identified in the 2018 study, both to build and operate a project. Second, it will assess and screen all available transit technologies that we could use within that corridor that would meet our expectations and meet the transit ridership needs within the corridor, and be fiscally constrained to what we believe we can fund. The next thing this upcoming study needs to do is introduce residents, St. Louis residents, and engage St. Louis residents on the possibilities of different transit technologies within the North Side South Side corridor. And finally, it's going to make a very detailed comparison of a preferred selected alternative to the project as it was envisioned in the 2018 study, so that an assessment and a decision can be made about which design to choose and how to move forward. A timeline of actions we've taken since this board approved funding for the alternatives analysis last year. That approval came in March. The new budget year began in July. We issued the RFQ for consultants to do this work in August. We received 4 responses. We thoroughly reviewed those responses with a selection committee with the support of bi-state staff, so support from our transit agency. We interviewed firms in November, also with bi-state staff in an advisory role. We selected a firm. We've completed a memorandum of understanding with bi-state, which was approved by the bi-state board of directors in January, and which allows bi-state to jointly and cooperatively manage the project with us. We've developed a scope of work, fee, and schedule for the selected consultant. And the final step is that BPS will execute the contract with the consultant. And they expect to do that in the coming weeks, sometime in March. So we should have a notice to proceed that begins on the 1st of April. The anticipated schedule is 15 months, wrapping up in June of 2022, when we anticipate having a completed report that sets the stage to translate this from a planned project into a real project that we can implement. So now to go directly to the budget, the request is for a supplemental $500,000 in this budget year, which we can use. There's some possible ways we can use that as an addition to the scope of work that we've already agreed to with the consultant. So I'm going to run through a few possible ways which we could use this additional $500,000 of funding, which will come online after the study has already begun. So one thing we need to do is that the uncertainty around the pandemic has emphasized the fact that we need to have a very robust community engagement process that needs to include both in-person engagement and remote engagement. And we don't want to shortchange either of those aspects. So as we get to the portion of the study that involves a lot of community engagement and education about the possibilities in this corridor, we want to make sure we can do that in the best possible way. So that's one way that this supplemental funding could be used. A second important way is that later this year, it's very likely that the federal government will approve a new 5-year federal transportation funding plan. The current plan is called the FAST Act, and it is running on a continuing resolution past its 5-year timeline. So it's likely that the federal government will approve a new 5-year transportation plan, which includes transit funding late this year in 2021. And when they do that, they sometimes change the rules and criteria for how they assess and fund projects. And that's going to happen kind of at the midpoint of the study we're doing. So if necessary, we want to have supplemental funding available if we need to reassess anything, if the rules change on us, essentially midstream from the federal government. We want to make sure we can account for that in this study so that the study is valid when it concludes in June of next year. And then thirdly, we'll be electing a new mayor soon. And we want to make sure that if the new administration needs to make their mark on this study or has questions they want answered, that we have supplemental funding available to be able to do that. Because we really want this to be an actionable study at the end of it in June of 2022. And we want, we want the next administration to have confidence that they have had input into the work that we're doing. But I will also emphasize that we're not waiting on this allocation to get started. We're very much ready to get started with the work that was authorized last year, beginning as soon as the contract is authorized by BP or executed by BPS. So that's the first line item. And then I'll also touch on the second line item, which is the balance of the transit funding, which the rest has been accruing and will continue to accrue towards the capital expense of a significant North Side, South Side capital transit project. To date, we have collected almost $40 million in revenue that we've been saving in order to fund construction. At the end of this fiscal year in June, we'll have approximately $41.5 million accrued. And at the end of the next fiscal year in June of 2022, for this budget, we'll have accrued around $52 million that'll be available for transit engineering and construction and local match funding towards a federal project. So that figure represents our nest egg, really, to build high capacity, high frequency, high amenity transit within this north side, south side corridor. And I believe that next year, at the conclusion of the analysis that we're about to start, we'll really be at a point where we can translate this long planned project into something real that serves the needs of residents of North and South St. Louis. I am happy to answer any questions at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ogilvie. Great presentation. There are some questions. I saw a note in the chat inquiring whether it's appropriate to ask questions during the course of a presentation or better to wait until the conclusion of each presentation. And I think the latter is the answer. I think it's best to allow the presenters to complete their presentation. Each of us can make notes about questions that occur to us along the way, and then we'll each have an opportunity to pose questions and listen to responses at the end before we ask for a vote on the request. So Mr. Meyer was the one whose name I saw in the chat. Mr. Meyer, do you have a question or two?
Yes, I do. Scott, last year we authorized $12,660,000 for transit. Whenever we're making an appropriation like that, is it just considered to be in place from year to year? And then what you're asking for is some additional modification to that? Or are we now starting from scratch?
No, we're not starting from scratch. So in this portion of the economic development sales tax revenue, so this 60% share of this tax that is allocated towards transit, all of that, since the tax was in place in late 2017, has been accruing into a fund that will support construction of the transit project. And so right now there is roughly, we're a little shy of $40 million in that fund. At the end of this fiscal year, about 41.5. We haven't actually made any expenditures out of that fund yet, but the 1.5 million that was authorized last year for the alternatives analysis, we're about to start expending that money with the consultant. And if this additional $500,000 was authorized, we would potentially, although not certainly, expend that with the same consultant through the course of the next 15 months of work on that project. But all of the other funding is essentially going into a capital fund that is just patiently waiting until we have a project that is actionable. And you know, significant transit projects are capital intensive, and you do need a nest egg on that. You don't want to dive into a new transit project without significant capital available.
Okay, because when I looked, the amount that was listed was $11,079,000. I thought, okay, is that just referencing what we expect to take in for that fiscal year? Okay.
Correct. Yes. And so last year, I think you mentioned it was around 12.8, and that 11.1 this year reflects the large decrease in sales tax revenue that's been caused by the pandemic. So that's the budget division's best guess on what we'll take in this coming fiscal year through that sales tax.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll ask other members of the board if there are additional questions. All right, hearing none, I have a couple that I would like to pose. Scott, who is the custodian of these funds?
Well, the comptroller, I suppose.
Okay, and do you know whether they are deposited in an interest interest-bearing account? And if so, whether that interest is accruing to your benefit?
Well, probably not to my benefit, but perhaps to the fund's benefit. But I would, I think, defer that question to Mr. Welterman, because I don't know. I'm not really involved in how they manage those funds, other
Okay.
than the work that we do with them. So
Todd, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so in general, those funds are all held actually by the treasurer and our state elected treasurer, Jones. They manage the amount of funds. The comptroller keeps books on it and authorized payments out of the bank accounts and that. So, they do some investing, and they, spread their money out amongst banks. And there's a once a year review when the mayor and the treasurer and the comptroller sit down and go over how things went. But that's about the limit of the review and what's going on over there. That your idea of collecting interest has always come up every year, whether it was Alderman's capital money sitting there not earning interest or something like that. That's a very good question, but that comes out of the treasurer's office.
Well, it just seems to me that this is a substantial sum of money, even though interest rates are very low these days. Given the amount of capital we're talking about, there could be a significant amount of revenue gained, even if we're only earning a half a point on the funds. And so I would encourage you, Scott, and you, Todd, to pursue that and just see whether there's anything to be accomplished in that category.
I think you're right. I think what we need to do, and Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as the city representative of this board, we will take your inquiry and we'll inquire to the treasurer and ask what's going on with that. We'll get the
Good.
comptroller and treasurer involved, and we'll ask them for a response. We got this $50 million egg sitting there, for another year or so. What can or should we do with it?
Yes, good. Thank you. And then my second question to Mr. Ogilvie has to do with the $500,000, which, as far as I can tell, is in addition to the 60% of the total anticipated revenue that your category would be entitled to. And I'm wondering how, if I'm correct in that assumption, how that would be, where that money would come from.
No, so look at the second page. So in the FY22 budget, the 60%, the total estimated of that is 11,079,000.
Yes.
And so we're subtracting 500,000 from that to use as supplemental funding to the alternatives analysis. And
Thank
the
you.
remainder of that, the 10,579,000, then accrues into the capital fund. So
It's an allocation. It's not additional funds.
correct. It's an allocation out of that 60% share.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Okay, I will ask once again whether there are any questions from any board member. And then I will ask whether there are any questions from anyone in the public realm.
Mr. Meyer keeps raising his hand, Jim.
Okay, I don't see that. So thank you for catching that. Go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Quick question for Todd. Did you say that the custodian is the treasurer for the state of Missouri or the treasurer for the city of St. Louis?
The city of St. Louis.
Okay, thank you.
That's a state elected office, but it manages the city as a county.
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
If I may, I was just looking at the state statute. I see just the requirement that we have to not, keep the funds a certain way. I don't see any prohibition against how they will be stewarded. So I just letting Mr. Welterman know we will follow up. We'll have a conversation about that following the meeting.
Good, thank you. And can anyone tell me, is there anyone on board today who is not a board member and not a presenter, but is here for whatever reasons in the public interest? Okay, apparently not. So if that changes, if anybody signs on, and would you please let me know, whoever can do that.
Chairman,
Yes,
I see a question from the public in the Q&A. It's from Mr. Connolly. And he would like to be able to see the document that's being referred to, the budget document. I don't know, I'm not the host, but I don't know if that's possible or if we could somehow make that numbers that Mr. Ogilvy is referring to available following the meeting, post them to respond to that.
Well,
Yes,
Todd, go ahead.
I might ask if we're gonna do a screen share, perhaps Kyle can share that budget so he can continue to run through it in each category rather than having me share it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I was on page 2 to the question. Yeah, so there's just for the public's benefit, we're talking about the request for FY22. And that's the transit study supplemental allocation of 500,000. And then the second line, 5666700, is the 10,579,000, which accrues into the transit capital fund for future expenditures.
any questions, Mr. Connolly?
I don't know if he is not a panelist, perhaps he cannot say anything. I'm not the host, so I'm not really quite sure how that is working.
You mean mechanically?
Yes.
Yes.
It
Yes,
looks
I
like
do.
he just commented, no questions.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate all the help any of you can give me in that regard, making sure we're attending to the interest of anybody who cares to participate. So thank you for that. All right, then, there being no additional questions in response to Mr. Ogilvy's presentation, I will ask whether there is a motion on his request.
So moved.
And who is that?
Gregory Meyer is making the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to Mr. Meyer's motion?
Second, Doug Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Is there
Chairman?
any? Yes,
May I ask that the motion be stated with a specific dollar amount, so for just complete clarity for the minutes and,
yes.
So the-
I'll summarize and
Yes.
and say that the total allocation that is requested is $11,079,000.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Mr. Ogilvy if we're requesting that amount or we're requesting $500,000?
The request is to allocate 500,000 into a fund that could be used as a supplement to the alternatives analysis, which I want to say has already been authorized, but we're about to execute that contract. So it would, and that money would be used kind of as needed. BPS would have to execute an addendum to their existing contract with the consultant to expend that funding on an as needed or as requested basis. So that's the first part. The second part is an allocation of the remaining funding, 10,579,000, into the fund that is accruing for capital construction in the future. So it's an allocation of both categories.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please.
Oh, Chairman, would you like me to call a roll?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
All right, Chairman, do you vote in the affirmative or negative?
Yay.
For Mr. Meyer,
Yay.
President Bradley. Does anyone hear President Bradley?
Can anyone tell if he's muted?
Yeah, he keeps texting me, telling me he can't talk. So he's muted on our end somehow.
Well,
Can you see him? Is he indicating, is he doing something to indicate his vote?
Yeah, I guess if he turn his face on and give us a thumbs up, we could see.
He just did that.
Okay. Ms. Johnson,
Yay.
Ms. Ford Griffin,
Yay.
and Mr. Petty.
Yes.
So it appears the motion carries unanimously, Chairman.
Thank you all. Congratulations, Mr. Ogilvy, and we'll see you in a year, I assume.
Terrific.
And-
Thanks,
And do
everyone.
well in the meantime.
We'll do our best.
All right, good, thank you. The next item on the agenda is titled, get back to the agenda, Neighborhood Revitalization. Don Rowe, the Director of the Planning and Urban Design Agency, will present. And I see that Otis Williams' name is listed as a presenter as well. So gentlemen, if you would like to proceed, please
Well, thank
do.
you. I'll kick it off. And just to give STL TV, Jason Whiteley, who is on the screen and a member of my staff, will be asked to assist me in the presentation at one point and will need to share his screen. I see Mr. Meyer has his hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Okay, just as a reminder, anyone who is going to speak, even though their name might appear on the screen, if they would state their name and what agency they represent.
Okay, fair enough. I'm Don Rowe, the Executive Director of the Planning and Urban Design Agency. Embedded in my presentation or time will also be Otis Williams, who's the Executive Director of the St. Louis Development Corporation. He'll say hello to everybody when he comes in. And then this adjunct of Jason Whiteley, who is a staff member for PDA and a researcher, will give you a little demonstration of a project that we've undertaken. So good to see you all again. And Kyle, just for reference, it's essentially page 3 that we'll collectively be addressing. Great to see you again. Certainly immediately after we met last year, COVID started to take its toll on everybody in terms of production and disruption to the lives and work products. That was no exception to this. And we're pleased very much that Cecilia Dvorak, who you met via previous meetings of authoring those white papers on neighborhood planning and activities related to what we're doing with EcoDevo, has been promoted during the last year into a management position and is managing this neighborhood planning program. She's currently on family leave, so not available with us today, but that's a big thing. She's a very talented young planner and has joined us. My agency as a whole, which is a small agency, through COVID, we've had 4 people that are in their 60s take retirement in the last year. So that's really been an impact on us. That I'll give you a easy thing to understand, that in terms of the current 2021 allocation, we anticipate that about 1.7 million of it from EcoDevo funds that's on page 3 in my agency's allocation will not be expended this year. So that's a sort of a pragmatic thing. The promoting of Cecilia has been a big aid. During the course of the year, one of the key things we did do and get permission to do is do some recruitment of new staff, additional staff. And so joining Cecilia's team fairly recently is 2 planners that we've recruited. One, Alexis Ida, I'm very happy to have joined us just a couple of months ago. And another one, Jonathan Roper, who just actually joined us about 2 weeks ago. All with an endeavor that we began in the personnel process in the end of August. Happy to have them join us. I want to make a mention about these 2 people in particular, as we talk about neighborhood planning, and we certainly have mentioned before, we've established a set of criteria for neighborhood plans, content-wise, public participation-wise, and that's been approved by the City of St. Louis Planning Commission last year. So those are the standards that new neighborhood plans have to come to. And I say that in part in our, frankly, state of Missouri, who's not as robustly embracing planning as other states, that came about from best practices, and it includes more things than just bricks and mortar. It certainly is in a neighborhood planning level. There's a lot of things about conditions and needs and opportunities that we need to explore. Enough so that often I'm referred to as a cantankerous advocate for planning in that broad sense. So I do begin some meetings as we're approaching folks that might be helping with neighborhood planning with some vital statistics from a neighborhood, like the number of homicides that have occurred in a neighborhood. It's really a reminder for folks when we have people that are participating from different parts of the city that we're not equally in equity and homogeneity as to conditions in these neighborhoods. So that's just an important reminder. I do want to talk a little bit, thankful that these staff members have joined us and now are fully in their positions, but only recently, of some neighborhood planning type of initiatives that have occurred in the last year. One of the things that was just getting underway in the spring was an effort with private funding. So it didn't, other than our staff time, didn't take from this budget, but it was an expenditure that got close over, in essence, about $800,000 for doing a new neighborhood plan for the two neighborhoods that comprise downtown. It's downtown and downtown west. Formerly, those were in a neighborhood plan that's 20 years old. It got updated with a process that was engaged and funded privately with the downtown entity that's working on it, and Cecilia and our team participating and nurturing along with many others in city government, most importantly also stakeholders downtown. That concluded in December with a adoption by the Planning Commission for those two neighborhoods to have this combined plan as an adopted official neighborhood plan for downtown. So that was a key accomplishment. We continue to work with the West End neighborhood as a prototype with St. Louis, Invest St. Louis. Dara Ettridge is a key component to our evaluation and guidance for citizen participation. She's been funding the work in the West End. And then we've been doing particular work in gearing up with Otis and his team in the area that is called Project Connect, which are the neighborhoods that include NGA and around NGA. Engaging in a neighborhood planning. There are funds that are coming to that from another source, but we've started that in the midst of COVID. So it's a organizational activity at the moment, working on and getting that geared up for 5 neighborhoods around NGA to have a planning process that will soon commence in real time with more outreach into the neighborhoods as opposed to just our setup. That could take another 12 months. That's pretty exciting. Those are neighborhoods with both challenges and opportunities. So we're gearing up for that. That's particularly good. I did mention that the Planning Commission has set standards for these plans. There are some efforts going on in the city that is geography by neighborhoods that will have some specific topics that they're working on from some partners. They may not yet rise to the level of a neighborhood plan. We may adopt them as something called the topical plan and then get our team to take in the next part. With that, and thinking about staff and thinking about what we've been doing, one of the things before, I think I'd like to do this now before I turn it over to Otis for particularly 2 line items, is show what our research department, which is a 1-person research department at the moment, and it's Jason Whiteley, is in support of what Cecilia's best practices have been. We've been developing a database methodology using city resources that we collect and others to have it be a web-based, easy to use, but technically sophisticated dashboard. And before I get too far into using the wrong terminology, it's in essence, it's in the sort of the beta testing right now. And I'd like Jason to be able to give you a quick demonstration of this soon to be web-facing, publicly available neighborhood-based data dashboard. If that's okay with the chairman, I'd like to.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
And Jason, with that and being able to share the screen, let's give everybody a quick little walk into that tool.
Okay, my name's Jason Whiteley, and I'm a research analyst with the Planning and Urban Design Agency. So what I'm going to show you is the neighborhood data dashboard that our department has been working on in support of the ongoing neighborhood planning efforts. The primary objective behind this dashboard was to kind of streamline the ability of our neighborhood planners to better understand neighborhood conditions and explore neighborhood data, and also facilitate neighborhood residents' engagement with data about their own neighborhoods so they can better understand and contextualize that information. So basically, we've been using Esri's operations dashboards to create dashboards on various different topics, usually leveraging administrative data from the city. So this one that I'm showing now is the building permits dashboard for 2020. And one of the great things we've been able to accomplish recently is that we can now update these dashboards with live automatic data. So what I'm showing you today is limited to 2020, but we do have the capability to create live dashboards that update daily as new information becomes available. So I guess I'll just kind of demonstrate some of the dashboards we've put together thus far. And as Don mentioned, this is still kind of in progress beta version, but it's an easy way to kind of look at various factors by neighborhood. So for this one, we're looking at building permits for 2020. Right now, we can kind of see an overview for the city as a whole, but we also have the capability to kind of zoom in on a specific neighborhood and see how many permits were issued, the total estimated project cost for those permits, the average project costs, the kinds of permits, and then we can further, I guess, filter those out if we have a specific interest. If we only want to see permits that are greater than $50,000, we can do that. We can see these 12 permits, or maybe we're only interested in residential permits, and we can further filter that. So far we've put this together for building permits. We also have strategic land use plan designations that we can filter at the neighborhood level and kind of get a better sense of what the conditions are on the ground at the neighborhood level. We've also done one for completed demolition permits. And this is actually all demolition permits data. We put this together for a specific, I think a specific neighborhood engagement meeting. So this one's a little different in format from the others, but the idea is still the same, where we can kind of look at, permits. And this is probably a good one where I can filter by date to just see only permits from 2020. So, and then we've also been working on a CSB request one as well, that provides various, high level information at the neighborhood level on CSB requests. So this one runs a little slower, and it's something we're still working on, but generally we can see the top request for the city. And I think right now I actually have this filtered for just the last quarter of 2020. And then we also have, this is an older version that we put together when we first started working on this initiative. So it's not current, and we might not have live data for it, but we can also look at crime conditions at the neighborhood level. So that's the I guess the overview of kind of what we've put together so far for neighborhood level data. And we're hoping that as we continue to develop these dashboards, they'll be very useful tools for our planners and for the neighborhood residents.
Thank you, Jason.
Yes, somebody started to speak?
Oh, it was just Don thanking Jason.
Yeah, well, you beat me to it. Thank you, Jason. Excellent presentation, and really, I think, exciting to be able to quantify all these different categories. Excuse me, I turned my phone off. To quantify all these different areas of concern or interest. So really, I think a terrific step forward. John, back to you.
Yes, and as you noticed, the key thing on the left-hand side was it was easily searchable by neighborhoods.
Yes.
So we keep that mantra as building blocks by having the neighborhoods. Let
me interrupt, Don, at this point, and because that presentation is complete, I just want to know if there are any questions or comments regarding that presentation just now. Yes, Mr. Meyer, not surprising.
Thank you. Will the census data automatically flood into this database, or do you have to enter it? Like, do you have to enter that information as it's available?
So we will probably create some kind of dashboard or interface for the neighborhood level census data when it becomes available later this year. So we will probably tabulate that once, and then the neighborhood level data that we generally tabulate and make available to the public from the census is only updated decennially. So we'll do that later this year, and then probably create some kind of interface to show that data, whether that will be a dashboard or some other kind of interface. I'm not sure yet, but that will only need to be updated once.
Okay.
And the point is, the Planning and Urban Design Agency is the city's depository of getting the census data. And, we'll use current and new technologies as Jason envisaged them to get it out there to the world.
Okay. And will the dashboard indicate whether the building permits by nature, just by nature perhaps of the dollar amount, will they then require electric charging stations? I know the Board of Aldermen passed an ordinance that said based on a certain dollar amount or how extensive a rehab or, if you were building new, that you would be required to have a certain amount of charging stations for electric vehicles.
So I'll step in for that, because that effort is something that's gone on with partnership from the Rich Bradley's organization, the Building Division, Scott Ogilvie, and the Office of Sustainability, and the Bloomberg Foundation grant. Yes, it's being enacted into law. There's phasing in of those requirements along construction, types of construction, and the size of the construction. But yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you're on mute.
All right, it wasn't allowing me to unmute. If someone would please take a look at the Q&A box, there are now 3 questions in there, one of which applied to Mr. Whiteley's presentation. Somebody would take a look at those and see if you can respond to them. And then I have a question, or at least a notion that I would like to put on the table. You don't need to respond to it, but for whatever it may be worth, I'm wondering if there's been any thought given to the notion of plotting existing census data, and then when the new census data are available, you would have the ability to contrast what has happened over the last decade.
We've done that before for for 2000 and 2010. So yes,
Good.
we'll be doing
All
that.
right. Good, excellent. Okay. So,
Jason will be busy later in the year. I see in the chat from Karen, absolutely. Our whole intent is to get this to be public facing. For terms I've used that I probably don't really know, we're in the beta testing right now, debugging it, but we'll be making this go live on the city website, in the matter of not much more than a few weeks. So early preview, but then certainly available. That's the intent. Have it out there so anybody with a computer can get to this. It's also, we're heavy users of an Esri product. They're the people that are the premier GIS folks globally. As we've been developing this, they've been interested in this, and they are prepared to nominate it for a national award. So yes, soon out for everybody to see and use.
good. Any additional questions on on Jason's presentation? Okay, back to you, Don.
So I'll do two quick things. The budget sheet really talks and has my staff salaries on it, but then there's some things in contractual and other services. Yes, we're trying to be computer literate and have computer technology, trying to get people to have exposure into national organizations to get membership and information. There's two line items I will speak under contractual services, then I'll turn it over to Otis. One is the specific neighborhood planning item. That's where, as we do things with our staff based in neighborhoods, there'll also be consultants that we've spoken about to be able to be recruited by us to say, do a market study on a particular issue, whether it's housing or commercial, whether there is a topic that comes up from the neighborhood that we need expertise. That's what that funding is particularly for, is to do that and service and help the neighborhoods. The last one on that is called Strategic Plan Update. And really, that's a shorthand that we've developed, but in all the planning world, that means the city's comprehensive plan, land use plan. And that is something that we recreated and finally established again. It's a legal binding document about the aspirations for land use across the city. We didn't have one for officially updated for a long time. We created a new one in 2020. We do some periodic updates, and we are now in a very much of a need to do a comprehensive look of it to see about updates that might be in particular in jive with Otis's equitable economic development strategy. And two, then the neighborhood plans, it's vital for the neighborhood plans, when we do a more deep down analysis and work in developing the neighborhood plans, those get to be sort of another level. If the citywide thing is land use, aspirations for land use, generally on a block or a half a block or a level, the neighborhood plans go down from that 30,000 foot level to specific detail. We need to get them in sync. So with that, that's all I'm planning to talk about, but certainly want to let Otis talk about some of the work that he's done in the past year, and particularly what's going on moving forward from that exciting springboard of what they've done. I'll take any questions, of course, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like now.
Well, it looks as though Mr. Meyer has a question. Go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you. Don, have you been able to add staff in this fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay, so the amount that we're seeing for staff reflects not only the fact that people have retired and been replaced, but that you have added staff.
Yeah, my comment about retirements were not necessarily, were people agency-wide, not necessarily from this funding.
Okay,
But,
and
yeah.
just to throw in one last question, do you feel that you now have adequate staff?
They work long hours. We have, the short answer is, I'm excited about now having a nucleus Cecilia is a stunning find as a planner. Promoting her is great. And as I mentioned, these two new hires, one just recently from 2 weeks ago, one is also a locally stunning planner involved in the American Planning Association. And I'll make one more note of excitement, because I'm the old guy that's, on the way out at some time, is one of Alexa has a master's degree from the School of Social Work at the Brown School and urban design. So match those two things, people and physical form. You bet I'm excited about the nucleus, but as we do more and more, we'll get more staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Rowe? Okay, thank you, Don. Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much. I'm Otis Williams. I'm the Executive Director for the St. Louis Development Corporation, and really appreciate an opportunity to speak. We get our funds through the CDA lines that are allocated to it. We work very closely with Don and PDA and with the city to get things done. And so I'm here to give you sort of an update on where we are. And if I would ask if the STL folks would allow me to share my screen, that would be very helpful.
Mr. Williams, you should be able to share your screen if you look at the
Okay,
bottom.
I am going to it now. Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so a little over 2 years ago, we commissioned the St. Louis Equitable Economic Development Framework with Mass Economics, which was our consultant. And over an 18-month period, we were able to involve a lot of people. And so today, what I want to do is just quickly give you a quick summary. And I'm going to pick through a presentation that normally I would provide, but I'll pick out a couple of key slides. One of them is that we developed this in parallel with other economic development planning initiatives that were ongoing. We worked with the design downtown, the Brick Line Greenway with Great Rivers Greenway. But I think the key here, this one says St. Louis Economic Development Plan, only because I haven't updated, but this is really STL 2030. And our coordination with them very closely on the Greater St. Louis, as Bruce Katz and his team were putting together the STL 2030 jobs plan and the 2030 vision. So one of the key clusters that came out of our framework was obviously to look at geospatial. As a result of the retention of the NGA, that has been a cluster that is bursting at the seams with excitement. And so these are the folks that we have worked with in the past. And all of that led to some, I call them the 30,000 foot level of the framework. It was aiming to grow the city's population, which really to sort of stem the exodus that is there, but ultimately by 2030, see that we have maybe about 30,000 and grow, exceed the national growth rate in jobs and payroll, and close the wage and employment gaps for ethnic minorities, and achieve a long-term tax revenue growth for the city. So that was the base of it. And so we obviously did a lot of public input, and I'm going to quickly go past this, but there were a lot of meetings with a lot of people that led to the ultimately to the framework. And the goals out of that came a number of things that will help us achieve it. These are there were 10 actually. And so these are the things that I'm not going to read them to you, but essentially these are the things that we're trying to get done. The second 5 that are there is basically to reduce vacancy rates and slow and reverse the population decline. But key was strengthening the city's fiscal outlook. And believe it or not, we were on our way before COVID with growth in taxes in the city. And I think the budget director and all would tell you that at the beginning of last calendar year, we were looking very positively, but obviously with the impact of COVID, we went into a decline. But let me go to what the request is that we're looking at here that we want to fund. A number of things came out of it that were things that we needed to implement. And one was to look at how we could put people on the ground to essentially work with the neighborhoods. And so SLDC essentially is going to reorganize, and this department that is called Strategic Development and Growth is a new department in SLDC, and it has a focus on creating project managers for the various neighborhoods. And so I will quickly share with you what those project managers will be doing, those geographic project managers. We will get about 6 to 8, but actually now it's 8 because we've defined the number of geographies that we will be working in. But essentially, they will be doing these things that are listed here. And we think by putting our feet on the ground and being proactive as opposed to reactive, that we will hopefully make a better impact on the city, and essentially getting closer to the neighborhood organizations and business owners out there, and working with the developers. And so we want this to be a bottom up as opposed to developer driven. Where am I here? Let's go. The next slide here is a continuation of what those duties are that will be done by those neighborhood project managers. And then the third slide here is the last of those duties. So these are the duties that we were talking about. But I want to share with you on this screen, this is a map of all 79 neighborhoods in the city. And what we have done is to divide it up into 8 areas, with this being the north and west. This is north and east. And this is our Project Connect area that Don mentioned before, where we built this to primarily support the NGA and the area around the NGA, and the fact that this new facility, which is now under construction, it will be located there beginning 2025. So we have downtown and the Central Corridor. Central Corridor here is a little large only because we have such a strong community development organization there with Park Central. Likewise, we have a very strong one here with Tower Grove, but we'll be working with those very closely. And then in the southeast with Dutchtown and further south. So these are the areas there, which equates to the ask that we have, which is to help. As many of you know, we do not get any direct funding from the city through general revenue. We are funded through several work programs through CDA, and those numbers go down on an annual basis as they are budgeting. But we are also fortunate to be able to receive a number of grants. We go after those pretty heavily, but we own assets that we receive monies for rental fees, if you will. But also we have a fee structure for those incentives that we award. And so that is how our body is funded currently. And so what we were hoping to do is to get additional funding here to implement this strategy and framework. And that would be to allow us to hire those geographic project managers, but also be able to focus on the clusters that that I mentioned. And I think I may have passed by that, but the clusters being life, health, and ag, geospatial, manufacturing, financial, business to business, hospitality and tourism, and then working directly with these businesses. And so those are the things that we have a focus on, and we need additional funding to be able to get off the ground and get started with that. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for any questions that may be asked of me.
Good, thank you, Otis. Are there any questions for Mr. Williams? Yes, Mr. Meyer. You're on mute, Greg.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, Otis, do I understand correctly then that last year there was 1,959,292 that was expended out of what was allocated?
Well, together with Don, I guess I'll be able to explain that. No, we had a portion of that, and the other funding in that category were used for other things. I think 2 years ago we had a category of 750,000 that we had that was used to develop the framework. And then there was an anticipation that we would have other funds for the follow-on year, but we did not expend any funds. And so we are now at that point where we're asking for funds for this coming fiscal year to be able to implement.
The important thing, thinking about using money from consultants, is the money that's in the 2019 line item, the 750,000. That money went directly to the consultants that participated and helped SLDC and the city develop that plan that he showed you.
Okay, because I just want to make sure as we get to the point where we're making a motion that we know how, do we have to break these up into separate motions? Is it one motion in terms of a total amount? Or how do we proceed so that when we do make the motion, we're being appropriate?
We would be
Sorry,
asking
go
for
ahead.
the motion for the bottom line number, that's the 3.4 million.
Guys, Chairman, if I could, when we get to the money part, I need to interrupt. I have some errors on this sheet. I think let's get the questions to Otis now. And there's actually a little more money we got to put in here to take care of Otis. So, sorry. All I can tell you is there's just so much going on. I blame COVID. We're starting our budget process. There's so many unknowns. We're scraping the old stuff up that wasn't spent, and we're going to ask you guys to appropriate it. So I'm going to let you get back to it. And when we're ready to talk numbers, give it back to me.
Okay, so.
Mr. Chair, then if I may make a point of personal privilege, my understanding is that Otis is going to be leaving us, and I just want to thank him for all his service.
Well, Mr. Meyer and to the board, thank you very much. I appreciate the comment. Thank you very much.
I want to go back to the last utterance I heard from Don, and that is that he was proposing that we act on the first two categories, numbers 143 and 141, in the amounts of $1,512,900 and $1,890,000 respectively. Total amount $3,402,900.
So we're going to defer that to Todd in a minute, because actually some work that Todd and Otis and I have done in the last day isn't necessarily reflected on this sheet. And I think that's what Todd will address.
All right, thank you for that. And then there is a third separate item, number 142, in the amount of $1,050,000. And my question is, to anyone who cares to answer, is whether we should be acting on the two categories, 3,000,004 and 1,050,000 separately, or whether there's any reason to do that, or can we simply act on the soon to be amended number of 4,452,000?
They all kind of go together. Don,
Yeah,
how
that's-
to handle that CDA portion about what they're doing, and then we'll
Okay.
do all the numbers if
Well,
you're,
why don't you speak up now, Todd, and tell us what the amendment is?
all right. Kyle, can you throw that up there for me? You see how pretty that looks? I'm sorry, that's my handwriting. But so we had to pull $1 million of old money. Actually, the CDA money didn't get spent last year, that million, $1 million of the $1,050,000. So we needed that money to cover some of Otis's asks. When Otis gets done with all his studies and then he needs about $1 million. So the original number was $850,000 short. So from the type proposal you have to my chicken scratching, it's adding $850,000 to the ask. And this is just bringing some old money forward so these planners and development people can do what they need to do. If Kyle, you go to the second sheet on this page here down to page 3 of 13, you'll see where the money's being added to the line items here. That economic development strategy is going to go from 550,000 to 1 million. And the neighborhood planning money goes from 650,000 to 1,050,000. That's where the money's particularly put in there to help these guys do their job and get the study. So that would make their total ask this 4.252900 number. So you can give me questions, or all three of us questions. And I apologize for the chicken scratching, and I'm gonna have one more chicken scratching on the next round, and then I'll clean it all up and I'll get you a clean one out tomorrow.
All right, thank you for that. First, let me ask if there are any questions or if there's any need for additional clarification on what Todd just described.
Chairman, I have a question, if I may.
Certainly.
I just for clarity,
All right.
Mr. Welterman, this is the all in the neighborhood revitalization category, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All falls in category 2, right?
Okay, and a lot of this is budget, and you've talked about old money and being used. So I just wanted to make sure the ordinance says that 10% of the money collected would be allotted for neighborhood revitalization. So these changes reflect that reality. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. Yes, Mr. Meyer.
So is there money that goes into the neighborhood revitalization category, which is 2 million a year? So does that mean we have unspent money from previous years? Because we only allocate money from the economic tax. So is the amount of money that is being allocated from that neighborhood revitalization fund, does that add up to the 4.2 million?
Anyone care to respond to that question?
I mean, this neighborhood thing jumps from, Don's shop to Otis's shop to Moke's shop. That neighborhood revitalization is in all three of their shops and kind of divided up. If you're asking, are they getting their fair share? I'd say, oh yeah, when you look at these numbers.
No, I just mean, is this money that has been accruing in the fund from the economic tax that will allow us to allocate it? I mean, do we have this money available in that fund?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's part of why we're down to chicken scratching now, because we had some money that's in the current budget year that wasn't being spent that I had to verify was still in the books. And you're going to see that occur again in the next category as well. It's
because if we only bring in 2 million a year, there had to be other money that was available that was unspent previously, or we couldn't allocate that much money.
absolutely. I'm caught up now. Yeah. So that million was left over from last year, and because we couldn't expend it. There's things you couldn't do in the neighborhood. There's things you couldn't go out and talk to people. You couldn't get down to the truth and have open meetings with people because of the virus. So rather than letting it sit there, we're going all in that this virus is ending and we're going to be able to carry on normal. If we lose a few months because of the virus and the pandemic, we'll be back next year reappropriating it again.
For instance, I had last year 1.1 million allocated for salaries, and we've only expended about 400,000.
Yes.
We brought that money forward as well. Okay.
And that principle was established at our very first meeting in 2016 or 17. Whenever this board first assembled, it was clearly, it was discussed and clarified and confirmed that funds could be carried forward. Unexpended funds allocated in a particular fiscal year could be carried forward to subsequent years. And that is what I believe Todd is telling us has happened here.
Yes. I mean, we'd look goofy if we weren't the taxpayers are putting this money in a box and we're letting it sit there getting dusty, and we're not trying to spend it on the things they want us to spend it on. So that's why we continue to try, even through a pandemic.
Yes. Good, okay. Now I'll ask again if there are any additional questions on any of the presentations from Don Rowe or from Otis Williams. All right, what I'm going to propose to simplify things and avoid further potential for confusion is that we consider a single number, a collective aggregate number in the neighborhood revitalization category.
And I would call that number, and it's not on there anywhere.
Yes.
I take the 4.2 and I add the 1,050,000. I come up with $5,302,900. $5,302,900 for category 2.
Thank you. Okay, so that is the sum that we will be considering. I will ask if there is a motion on that request.
So moved, Bradley.
And who is that, please?
Bradley, Board Member Bradley.
Thank you, Rich. Is there a
Second
second?
by Gregory Meyer.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the question. May we call a roll call vote, please, Barbara?
Yes, Chairman Dwyer,
Yay?
Mr. Meyer,
Yay.
President Bradley,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson. I'm not hearing Ms. Johnson. Is anybody,
I'm here.
okay,
I couldn't click fast enough.
understood. Ms. Ford Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Petty,
Yes.
and it would appear the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all for the presentations and for the vote. We'll now move to item number 3 on the list of workforce development. Mr. Hayes and Ms. Russell will be presenting.
Okay, good morning, Chairman Dyer. Can everyone hear me? This is Howard
Yeah.
Hayes, Executive Director of Slate. And it looks as if someone is still sharing a document, and at some point I will want to share a document. Yes.
There you
Okay,
go.
perfect. So to say what a year it has been would be an understatement, I think. Over the past 12 months, Slate was closed for several months to the public, but I'm happy to say with the funding that we received from the board last year, we were able to put together web-based strategies to still reach our clients and to serve them. A couple of key areas I want to draw your attention to last year. We asked for computer tech and supplies, replacement of software agreements, that type thing. It came in handy. All of our staff were able to work remotely. As a matter of fact, because of the pandemic, we are still on a rotating basis because everyone isn't vaccinated yet, working from home. But again, it was seamless in terms of laptops. And to be frank, it is a direction we should have been moving in some time ago because we've experienced deficiencies based on our team being able to meet clients where they are via cell phones. We had an opportunity from home to contact over 15,000 unemployed St. Louisans and offer them services, that type thing. So that's the technology piece. Right now, there were two key initiatives driving what we completed last year. One of them was every 3 years, job centers in Missouri are certified. That is a monumental task. Frankly, if you do not complete that initiative, your funding could be in jeopardy. We used our additional staff as well as technology capabilities to meet that measure. And so now Slate, with your assistance, is fully certified. As a matter of fact, we were one of the first job centers in Missouri to be certified. And the state director sent that directly to the mayor's office. The second item, it is a 4-year strategic plan. And it's more than just a plan that will sit on the shelf. Our strategic plan had to be ranked and measured by a committee in Jefferson City. And if not approved, again, our funding would have been in jeopardy. But we used our categories that we asked you for last year, management consultants, professional services, that type thing, to assist us with the plan. And if I could share my screen a little bit, let's see here. This is just our cover sheet that accompanied a plan that was, see, it's not moving. Wait a minute. Okay, well, I will. Okay, I'm not getting it to move, but in general, it would say the strategic plan for Slate for 2020 through 2023. This was about a 200-page document, and we were able to work with the additional staff that we asked you for, as well as our consultants in finance, management, et cetera, to have this plan submitted to Jefferson City and approved. And again, it will carry us strategically in terms of programming, finance, management, outreach for the next 4 years. And again, it had to be measured and approved, or again, our funding would have been in jeopardy. So with that, that has been kind of an overview of how we use the funds from last year. And if it's okay, I'd like to move to our request for this year.
Yes.
As you know, the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment is not currently funded out of the general fund. Instead, it relies wholly on federal grant funds. These funds are severely encumbered, and this limits our ability to serve more customers, increase staff performance, enhance technological capabilities, and implement outreach to the philanthropic and business sectors. Further, the proceeds of the half-cent economic development sales tax will allow Slate to provide matching funds for a pending pre-apprenticeship program administered by the Department of Labor, and continue to provide services to address the very involved legal operations of Slate. We have designed our requests around the 7 habits of highly effective workforce programs. Actively engage local business, use labor market data to drive decisions, treat education like a job, connect people to careers. Number 5, provide wraparound student services. Number 6, tap innovative funding sources. And number 7, embrace evaluation. At Slate, we have one mission: train St. Louisans with skills employers need and match them to good jobs that need to be filled right now. Someone from the current administration said, we can no longer afford to train and pray. We have to be involved with the regional business community, and the regional business community has to be involved with Slate so that we can match our clients to jobs that are in high demand, not tomorrow, but today. So our ask today is approximately $922,000. We intend to spend that on item 1, salaries and benefits, and just a few key positions for you. I now have a deputy executive director. This will allow the executive director to become more involved with strategic planning and outreach to the business and philanthropic community. I've recently been elected to the United Ways board, and I intend to use those connections to grow the strategic partners for Slate. My executive secretary, she maintains a database of contracts, liaisons with the Board of E&A and the Comptroller's Office. We live and breathe on the timely processing of contracts. Public Information Officer, they will manage webinars, create outreach materials, maintain partner relationships with the community and local media. As of now, the COVID repercussions are still upon us. So March 2nd, I'm going to host with the mayor a webinar for about 50 businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. Again, there's costs for Zoom calls, increasing access for our employees and that type thing. So we will use those proceeds to keep us pushing through to the 21st century. Again, computer tech supplies. We want to continue to update and complete the software license agreements. As you know, the pandemic has forced us to develop strategies to reach clients via technology, and we want to continue to do that. Education and training, internal and external training seminars, webinars, conferences. One benefit of the pandemic is that we've been able to have staff register for training seminars without the accompanying cost of hotel and travel expenses. So if there is anything that is of benefit for the pandemic, it's allow us to keep costs down. We want them to attend going through this year, how to better serve justice engaged youth. For an example, even in the pandemic, we put team members in at least 3 neighborhoods that have high homicide rates, because the studies we read said a lot of homicides were tied to hopelessness and lack of employment. And so we want to continue to do that. One of the strongest advocates for job centers is the National Workforce Development Board. We want to attend their seminars, we want to partner with them, and we want to bring national best practices to the city of St. Louis. And then again, our management consultants in finance, programming, and technology, they have been of significant benefit. We expect that the dynamics from the state in terms of performance will not change. They are helping us keep pace. And operations. There is need, as it was last year, to strengthen the executive office. We don't have an attorney on staff, but we have a very complimentary agreement with the city in that we have an attorney on loan, and the involved legal obligations we have with state and federal government. It takes a very sharp attorney, and we have one. Also, there are opportunities for us for now and in the future. We are pending what we believe will be a $1.1 million apprenticeship workforce development grant from the Department of Labor. There will be a need to have a match for that, and we want to use some of the EcoDevo funds to provide the match. We expect about 70 young people in underprivileged areas to go through that program. And if we can assist with these dollars in terms of the work boots they'll need, they'll be building homes, hands-on training with Rankin Institute. They'll need uniforms, books, that type of thing. So we want to use those dollars to support with the match. That is, and we realize that sales revenue has been down, but we also want to create materials that will allow us to go to the philanthropic community and ask for financial assistance. So we will share the pain of the city. And again, our request this year is for about $923,000. So I'll entertain any questions, Chairman Dyer.
Good, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. May I have questions? Are there questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just for clarification, when we're talking a ballpark figure, the number I'm seeing is $922,584. And I might open that up to Mr. Welterman. Is that the correct amount?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks for specifying that. It's important that the minutes reflect accurately and thoroughly what we consider and what we do today. So, Mr. Meyer, are you? Yes.
So the total ask is for $1,845,584.
No,
we haven't heard the second half of the presentation yet.
Okay.
So right now I'm asking for questions or comments on Mr. Hayes' presentation, the bottom line for which is $922,584.
Correct.
My question then on there would be, in your programming, would you be able to help train people who are involved in construction with asbestos abatement? I know that Alderman Narayan was promoting the idea of having a program whereby people could be certified by the Department of Labor, through the Department of Labor, so that if they were doing demolition, for example, they would have a certification that would show that they know what safety measures they have to follow as an individual to protect themselves when they're dealing with these hazardous materials. So is that something that Slate could or would be involved in?
That is something that I would bring before the team and we would look at. Right now, we know there is a high demand for carpenters, and we're working with Slate and the Rankin organization to bring them to market. But we are open in terms of those high performance jobs. Again, it's not necessary for our young people to have a degree, but they must have a path to success, and the trades can do that. So you're right, Mr. Meyer.
Okay, thank you.
Are there additional questions from any board member?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Board Member Bradley. I just want to take the opportunity to thank Director Hayes and his staff for the fine work that they're doing at Slate along during the pandemic here, when it's very critical that people have jobs and are employed. And I think this is a great thing. And I think that Mr. Hayes and his staff are doing an outstanding job. And I just want to acknowledge that.
Good. Thank you for that. Any additional comments or questions? I have a couple, Mr. Hayes. I'm wondering, I'm glad you mentioned Rankin because I was wondering who your partnerships might be with, what existing entities you might be collaborating with. And I know of Rankin's reputation and accomplishments, so I'm glad to hear about that. I'm wondering if you have had any engagement with Launch Code.
We, Launch Code's on the table. And I've forgotten the director's name, he's reached out to us, but primarily now our partners with this Department of Labor grant, the Rankin Institution, the St. Louis Public Schools, the Association of General Contractors, the Jobs for Missouri program that is chaired by the governor and his wife, as well as additional partners around the region.
Good. Well, thank you. The reason I brought up Launch Code is partly because I'm familiar with their operation and have I think, an informed sense of their accomplishments. And it just seems to me that that category of employment is a growing one. That's certainly what they're preaching. They're advising us that the community has a seemingly ever increasing need for skilled people in that category, computer savvy. So it's something to think about. I know that they're at capacity right now in terms of the number of students they can accommodate at any given time, but it may be worth exploring further. And
you're absolutely right, Director Dwyer. Mentioned in this meeting has been the 2030 Jobs program for the city of St. Louis, led by consultant Bruce Katz. I was a part of that, the development of that plan. And as we looked at key sectors, technology was one, construction was one, and we want to tie a lot of what we do here at Slate into that plan. And so we have things that to bring to you next year that we think you will say, yes, we see significant progress.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, unless there are additional questions, we can move now to Ms. Russell's presentation. I don't know whether you were on board at the outset, Mr. Hayes, but we're going to consider the larger number, the sum of the two categories in a single vote. So the next step would be to hear from Valerie Russell on the $923,000 request for Director of Human Services.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Dwyer and the members of the board. I want to first ask if you can all hear me since I am not on the screen.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. As you are aware, the youth development funds were utilized to implement a program called Youth Empowerment Services Portfolio. In year one of the dollars that were allocated, there was roughly a little over $2 million in which we contracted with 9 entities to do 2-year pilots. Last year, you awarded funds for the additional pilots that we were to seek bids for. However, with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, we could not do an RFP on the basis of bringing youth into group settings and other types of programming. What did occur was the year 2 projects from the first allocation continued. We required that they provide us with a plan for their services in keeping with the COVID requirements of social distancing, et cetera, and that those agencies continue to provide services as possible. You can well imagine the difficulties in continuing as well, because the schools, both elementary, high school, and college, went to virtual learning for the most part. What we have found is that the youth that we were trying to reach with our programs were disengaged because of the virtual educational opportunities that they had to involve themselves in, and because it took up a large portion of their day. Many of them did not have Wi-Fi or internet access, nor did they have cell phones that would allow them to participate. Our subcontractors were impacted by those limitations. However, they did move forward to try to adjust. What we have found and what we intend to continue to do is for the year 2 or year 3 funding that we're asking for now is to do some adjustments to the programs that are currently operating, providing them with a 3rd year of funding. And we're going to be requesting additional funds to, again, go out and try to secure additional subcontractors who can provide the youth services. We intend to, and our program providers have been providing hybrid employment, in-person work, remote jobs, and remote training. They have been working in much smaller groups of youth in order to maintain COVID protocol. They've been providing increased emotional and academic support for the youth who are having to adjust on their own and their parents to the ravages of the pandemic and what it's done to maintain individuals inside. And they're doing more virtual academic and personal development instruction. If you remember, we're working with youth 16 through 24 and disabled youth. We have 8 subcontractors who are participating. It is our goal to continue with those 8, and then again, as I indicated, go out for bid to provide some additional youth development programming that we currently don't have. As I indicated, we did not utilize, with the exception of a staff position, the funds that you allocated and awarded last year. So we are requesting a rollover of approximately $500,000 from the $1,090,000 that you awarded last year to go into year 3. I believe that Mr. Walterman has those figures there for you, and that we would ask that you approve the continuation of the youth development programs that are operating, and that you allow us to secure additional funds from you as a rollover into the request for this year so that we can increase the number of programs. Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you for that request.
All right, Kyle, can you throw that second page up of Valerie's stuff here? So it'll be page 8 of 13. So as Valerie mentioned, back in FY21, you guys helped us appropriate the $1,090,661, and that's the number due to COVID Valerie didn't touch. So, you know, hey, you'd say, put it all in this year. But I think Valerie and I talked and we're like, let's put half of it in this year and half of it in next year. There's no point in blowing a program up twice as big and then deflating it a year from now. So the ask is that from the document you have in front of you, we changed that FY22 request of Youth Empowerment Program grant from that $868,000 to $1,368,712. And then, you know, that would necessarily go to page 1 and add that $500,000 to that 923,000 number, Kyle. If you go back to that page 1, if you look under workforce development, the 800 human services, you'll see my line through the 923. What we're basically asking to do is take $500,000 of last year's money and add it to this to make that ask 1.423. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. So just to clarify, the same principle that we discussed in the last category applies here, and that is that unexpended funds are authorized to be carried forward to subsequent years. But in this instance, where there was approximately $1 million of unexpended funds in the previous fiscal year, you're asking for only half of that amount to be carried forward, correct?
That's correct.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
So the number now is,
The total approval for item 3 would be $2,345,584.
thank you.
Chairman, I have a question for Director Walterman, if I may.
Yes,
I want to make sure we had the amount that we talked about, the 922,584 for Slate. And I see a staffing number for Slate that was listed separately. I'm just trying to look at 259,756 on your working document. And then Director Russell's number is the number that you just testified to, the 2,345,584. Is it inclusive of all three of those amounts?
And it also should include the one staff position in Human Services.
well, what we're interested in primarily is making sure we have the numbers correct. So I want to recite what I believe we have concluded, and I'm going to ask anyone who is better informed than I to correct me if I've got it wrong. And that is that what's on the table, or will soon be, is a request of $922,584 in category 121 for Slate, and 923,000 plus 500,000 carried forward for the Youth Empowerment Program, for a total of $2,345,584.
That's correct from Walter.
Thank you. All right, so that is what we're considering. I don't think I've asked whether there are questions for Ms. Russell regarding her presentation. All right, I do not hear any indication of questions, so I'm going to propose that that I'm open to a motion on the request, the aggregate request in the amount of $2,345,584 for the two categories, number 121 Slate and number 800 Youth Empowerment Program.
So moved by Gregory Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Is there a second?
Second by April Griffin.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call the question and we'll do a roll call vote once again.
All righty. Chairman Dwyer,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
President Bradley,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Ford Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Petty,
Yes.
and the motion appears to carry unanimously.
All right, thank you for the presentations and for the votes. And we will move now to item number 4, public safety infrastructure, Judge Edwards.
Chairman, if I could, the judge was ill, and so Charlene Deacon's here. She's the Assistant Public Safety Director, and she's here to speak. Charlene, you got to take yourself off mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, awesome, thank you. As Todd said, I am the Deputy Director of Public Safety, and thank you all for having me this morning. It is technically still this morning. There are two bullets noted under the Public Safety Infrastructure agenda. The first is the mass notification system. That is a contractual service that is managed under the purview of one of our divisions, the City Emergency Management Agency. This funding will provide I believe it'll be the fourth year of funding for this mass notification system, which was implemented in fiscal year 19. Right now, I am advised that we have over 217,000 citizens enrolled in this system and 4,500 employees. And so that number will continue to grow as we roll out different informational pamphlets and so forth with the water bills and tax bills to everybody. So that is moving along well. As it is right now, the subscriber, the citizens elect how they want to receive the notifications, from a landline to cell phone to text messages to emails. And it has worked out well for us. And we appreciate the support that we receive from your board on this initiative. The second item is the public safety answering point and 911 upgrades. So let me just say that this is a subject that I've been working on personally for many years. And I really appreciate the support of the administration and the Board of Public Service on moving this project forward. It appears as though, based on the packet that I received this morning, that the board has previously been briefed on the history of the move toward consolidating our Emergency Operations Center and currently bilocated first responder dispatch systems into one modern, secure, and hardened from a terrorism aspect facility that's not downtown. And so there's a laundry list of action items, if you will, associated with this undertaking, which is very expensive and probably will cost somewhere between $30 and $32 million in total. But what that includes is a fair number of consulting needs, some of which are already underway, feasibility planning and conceptual design under the purview of the Board of Public Service, final design services, construction site preparation, the actual building and preparing the bids. And then there are other items associated with the furniture and fixed assets within the facility, the consoles and dispatching equipment, the computer aided dispatch, the call handling equipment, any number of about a dozen or so action items under there. So although we have been held up a little bit in moving this project forward because we've been so focused on responding to the pandemic, the allocation that we're asking for this year is modest, but what it allows us to do is to continue moving forward with this project because it's important for the city, it's important for our emergency responders, and it's important for the citizens they serve.
Thank you. Does that complete your presentation?
It does.
Thank
Unless
you.
there are any questions, I'll be happy to provide additional information. I have a wealth of it in front of me right now.
Good. We may ask you to reach into that wealth. So are there any questions from board members? Mr. Meyer.
Is there anything within our available funds that can assist in providing better access to 9/11 right now? Because we've heard through the media that there are numerous instances where people call 9/11 and they're put on hold or they're not able to get assistance. And I don't know if it's within our area that we can do anything in a more immediate way to try and aid in improving that kind of situation.
Well, there are a number of things I think that are impacting response times. not the least of which is the number of vacancies we have in dispatch. And I just saw this morning that the personnel department is trying to help us with recruiting with a higher advanced starting salary for some of our police dispatchers. And so we're working furiously to get our total complement of dispatchers up. It would be ridiculous for me to say to you today that there's nothing that can be done, because clearly there are a bunch of things that can be done. But I think that we need to be cautious about investments in the existing infrastructure, which is, kind of old, but because we have this PSAP plan moving forward, and there are a lot of moving parts to it, and it would be ill-advised to invest in some technology that we really can't accommodate right now. And so, we would appreciate all the help that we can get, but there just are so many moving parts to this at this moment. If you know anybody that wants to be a dispatcher, send them downtown or send them online to personnel so we can fill all of our existing vacancies. And these are primarily police dispatchers, but part of the issue and part of our drive toward consolidating services is we have other dispatchers that work out of the fire department headquarters, some of whom dispatch fire equipment and some of whom dispatch ambulances. And so in a modern emergency response communication system, those things would be not only co-located in a modern secure facility, all of those people would be paid in an equitable fashion and have more equitable benefits than they do, and would have nice up-to-date equipment and be cross-trained and cross-certified so that we can achieve some economies of scale and just make it a better place to work. Because quite frankly, it's a challenging occupation in the first place. And so I think this year, so many people were impacted by the pandemic that it just exacerbated our recruitment abilities for our vacancies in particularly police dispatch.
And I guess what I was wondering is whether there was anything that we could do to assist to where, like maybe if we allocated some money that would help you in your advertising and recruiting, so that there would be additional resources available for that. Because I realize there's some things that are really beyond what we're able to do.
If I could real quick, one thing that I think has made this pop a little bit is the residency rule. We've got that little thing, that little window for a couple of years here now, where if you start working for the city and you're a cop or a dispatcher, you don't have to live there. So I know they have they got 16 or 17 people lined up for interviews here in the next week. So we've seen a little pop. We don't know if it's enough, but it's going to get better. And, what we're working on here, what the ask is today is to, make it better, even better in the future.
So I would like to jump in and pick up on Greg's question. It happens that I'm involved at the local level, the neighborhood level, in safety and security initiatives, and therefore I have a little insight into the general sense of responsiveness on the part of the 911 system. And I have to say that whatever the reasons are, my impression is that there is frustration. And so Gregory's point about whether there's anything that can be done sooner rather than later, I think is an important observation. And I would just, I'm sure the people who are responsible for the operation are more aware than I. And so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I just want to encourage you to be conscious of that and take whatever steps you reasonably can to improve both the perception and the reality of the 911, the effectiveness of the 911 system.
Right, and I appreciate that, and you're absolutely correct. And I think probably the most important thing that we can do is continue moving forward on the consolidated PSAP, because some of the dispatchers are working in such close proximity to each other, and with the pandemic response, it has just been hard. And again, it's an occupation that requires a very specialized skill set, which not very many people have.
I get it. I understand the judgment, the ability to make judgments about priorities and all of that stuff that goes into it. But good. All right. So that point I think is covered. The other point I want to inquire about, well, on that program specifically, what is the timetable? What is the expectation for completion of this and implementation of this program?
Well, our timetable's been pushed back, and I think that probably the person most informed about what that looks like now, since we pretty much stopped in I think it was May or so, because we had to. That perhaps Rich Bradley can chime in here.
Thanks, Charlene. Yeah, originally the timetable was supposed to be completed for move-in in the second quarter of 24. The project was placed on hold on May the 1st as a function of the pandemic. So let's just imagine that by the time that we actually pick this up and start moving ahead again, we're about 12 months behind. So completion would be approximately the end of the first quarter, second quarter of 25.
So thank you, Rich. So we have then 4 more years of essentially the existing conditions, which sort of, in my view, emphasizes the importance of attempting, taking whatever steps can reasonably be taken over the course of the next 4 years to improve service. So I'm just driving that home. The second question I have has to do with the mass notification system. And this is just a matter of interest. I received those notifications and I am grateful for them. I have been intrigued by the question that follows the substance of each notification, and that is the request to acknowledge receipt. And what is the point of that? What is the objective?
Well, I think it's an evaluation tool that sort of, on the one hand, we can say we're glad that we have 200,000 plus subscribers, but I think the confirmation allows us to get an idea about who's paying attention and is the system working and where is it going.
Good. That's what I thought. And so you talked earlier, I think, about stuffers or enclosures that go out in tax bills and water bills and things of that sort. You might consider making a point of that you encourage feedback so you can evaluate the effectiveness of your system.
That's a good point, and I will be sure to share that with SEMA.
Good. Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the public safety infrastructure proposal? Let's make sure we understand the numbers. The sheet that I'm looking at has 3 entries, categories 160, 625, and 900 in the amounts of $300,000, $100,000, and $350,000 for a total of $750,000. And then there is an asterisk with a note indicating that $1.1 million remains unallocated. And I assume that's what we were just talking about. The 9/11 upgrade. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what that's accounted for. I think we're trying to figure out where we are fiscally because of the operational and revenue impact of COVID. But I did not really speak to the $300,000 item. that's on the budget. That is the service fee that's managed by the comptroller's office for the 911 system, because the comptroller's office is in general provides administrative or fiscal oversight of communications throughout the city. So I don't really know the details of that, but it's consistent with prior years. But I did not really speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Todd, can you clarify the note on the 1.1 million that remains unallocated?
Yep. It's my budget director's grip on this until we figure out how the budget pans out. We're waiting on this next quarter to come in to see what the impacts are to budget, because there's a possibility we take that 1.1 and try to keep the lights on in the city, paying for something that's related to this category. But we don't know what it is right now. So we didn't want to put icing out there and think everybody's going to get something when we might need this just to keep the police running. It's pretty bad. We still haven't seen our hotels and stuff. They're still operating about 75% below normal. So it's a prep number my budget director wouldn't give me. He wouldn't let me have that money to help spend it.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to clarify for the benefit of the board so that we know what it is we're acting on. So the proposal then is the request is for approval of a $750,000 sum.
Yes.
Are there any additional questions on that request? May I have a motion?
I move that we appropriate $750,000 to the public safety category. A motion made by Gregory Meyer.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second, Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Is there further discussion on the motion? Will you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, indeed. Chairman Dwyer,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
President Bradley,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Ford Griffin,
Yes.
and Mr. Petty.
Yes.
The motion appears to pass unanimously.
Thank you. Is there, Todd, there is another item, a category 5, City Infrastructure Capital Fund, that is on the sheet I'm looking at, which is part of your draft budget. Is that something we should take into consideration, or is that separate from our responsibilities?
So that's part of the EcoDevo funding, but in the ordinance, it's an automatic that goes over to the capital fund committee to evaluate whether it goes to rolling stock or fixing roofs or whatever.
So there's no action required by us. It's just information. And that is a function of a percentage in the ordinance, a percentage of the revenue that goes into that category?
That's correct. It's 10%.
Good, thank you. Okay. Is there any other business to come before the board today? Yes.
I do
Mr.
have-
One question, Todd. I had asked at our last meeting if there was going to be a location on the city website for this board. Can you update us on where that is?
No, I didn't do that yet. I'm sorry. I did have the auditors come to me in the last 6 months, and I put everything together in a package, and I got to get with our website people and just put it up there. I'll make that as another note of one of my action items. We're going to check on where the 50 million sits, see if we get some interest, and we'll get that website rolling here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional business to come before the board today?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, the question is two things. Well, actually, it's a two-part question. One is to ask why, is it possible to consider having a biannual meeting And the reason that I ask that is because there's a lot of time frame in between, a lot of information, number of things that are occurring in between, that being one. The second part would be if there are some quarterly updates, just to know where the moving parts are. That would be helpful for us, because so then it's not a disconnect. Because I do believe if it's every 12, that's like a literal disconnect when you're coming to this group to say, give consent or approval, and it would be helpful to be a part of the process.
I agree. I think a year is a long time, and it's a stretch for us to remember exactly what we approved and what we expected a year ago. And so the notion of either an interim meeting and or periodic reports from each of the entities requesting funds is a constructive idea. Todd, do you have anything to suggest or think, any thoughts about that?
No, you're right. That's on me. I think we owe you guys more than we're giving you. And I think just time flies by and I kind of forget about it. So let me go back. I owe you a couple action items here. So we'll communicate how we're doing on these 3 items in an email here the next 30 days. And we'll update you whether it's going to be reports or whether we want to have a Zoom or something in 6 months.
Terrific. So, and I'll take some responsibility for reminding you. All right.
You got my number. Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. Good. Mr. Petty, thank you for that. I think that's a really constructive thought and recommendation. So, and thank God for embracing it.
Yes, great.
So I'll ask once again, any additional business?
Chairman, you have the minutes still hanging here if you want to look at those.
Oh, yeah. Boy, thank you. Thank you. So as I said at the outset, we just received the minutes shortly before this meeting began, and I wasn't certain that there was adequate time for people to review them. Let me ask, is there an interest in taking 5 minutes or so for each of us to read through them before we take action on them?
That would be helpful for me.
All right, let's just do it. We'll go quiet for a few minutes, and we'll read the minutes, and I'll call us back into action shortly.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I'd like to call for the question in the interest of time, please.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve our meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, we have, I assume that each of us has been reading the redlined version of the minutes. Is that correct?
Correct on my part.
I picked up 3 very minor items that I would like to address in order to make the record as accurate as possible. And let me ask, first of all, is there a second to them on the motion, and then we'll go into discussion.
I'll second the motion to approve the minutes. Gregory Meyer.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I have 3 very minor comments. The pages are not numbered, so I can't refer to the pages, but so my pages are not necessarily in order, but on the page where in the middle in bold, it says Chairman Dwyer called agenda item 5B, neighborhood revitalization. And tell me if you're with me, Barbara.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so if you move down from that bold entry at the center of that page, down to the red line section in the 3rd paragraph below, you have a line that begins with the word development funds previously allocated. And that is followed by the word where, which I think should be were.
Okay, so noted.
You with me on that?
Yes.
All right, the next one I have is on a page, again, it's not numbered, so I hope it's in order, but it's a page where there is an extensive redlined section about mid-page, just below the mid-page line. And it begins, the paragraph I'm referring to begins with the words Otis Williams.
Okay.
And in that extensive redlined section about the midpoint, there is a sentence that begins, he spoke about members of that consulting team participating in, and the word "an" was stricken and replaced with but I think it should be "an," in participating an ongoing study. I told you these were small.
Yeah, and someone internally made the edit. Which do you you're offering today that it be amended to clearly reflect an.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I think that's appropriate.
Understood.
And then in the following paragraph, which begins Executive Director Williams stated, in the second line of that, the first word is purposes. He stated the allocation of funds for 2 purposes. I think there should be a colon there. And then the 2 purposes would follow.
Okay, colon following purposes.
I think so.
Gotcha.
All right. I
Okay.
apologize for what may seem petty. No pun, Mr. Petty. But
Would Mr. Bradley amend his motion to reflect those edits?
Yes, I would like to amend my motion to read, I would like to approve the amended minutes per Chairman Dwyer.
And Mr. Meyer, would you second that amended?
Yes, Gregory Meyer will second.
Great.
Are there any other observations or comments regarding the minutes? Hearing none up.
To get the minutes from today's meeting sent to us
sooner?
Yes.
Yes, well, noted.
Okay, that's note number 4. I got it.
All right, thank you. All right, hearing no additional comments, I will call the question on the minutes. All those, or we'll do the roll call again, Barbara.
All righty. I don't know if it's okay. Chairman Dwyer,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
President Bradley, Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Ford Griffin,
Yes.
and Mr. Petty.
Yes.
Yes, that motion carries unanimously to approve those minutes as amended.
Good. Thank you all for that, for everything. This was a long meeting, but a good one, I think. So thanks to everyone for your contributions, and we'll look forward to interim reports and perhaps a mid-year meeting.
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yes.
April Griffin. I would
Yes.
like to request, can the PowerPoint presentations that were put up on the screen, can those be sent to us? Because, you know, oftentimes they appear very small and you don't really have time to read through them fully at this time. And so
Yes.
I would appreciate if those departments that shared the PowerPoint presentations would forward those to us electronically. Thank you.
Electronically, good. I was going to ask your thoughts about format. So good, yes. Todd, can you orchestrate that for us?
Item number 5, yes.
All right, thank you. We're not going to pile on anymore.
Oh,
All
it's
right.
fine. It's all fair. All your comments have been fair, guys, gals.
Okay, good. Okay. Final question. Any additional business today? Hearing none, I will consider a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Gregory Meyer.
Thank you. Can we agree unanimously?
Yes.
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 All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good day, all.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
Good.